Originally, I was going to try and beat New Super Mario Bros. U without running. It seemed like a good idea for a challenge video, but it wasn't long before that was proven false. The problem is that you're given way too much time to complete each level, and it just wasn't very interesting to talk about. But then I remembered Luigi U. That game has much shorter levels, as well as a stricter time limit. They're designed to be completed in a speedrun-esque way, which is immediately more interesting than playing standard Mario levels. So today, let's figure out if it's possible to beat New Super Luigi U without running. The only rule for this challenge is that I'm not allowed to run, which means that any power-ups or other forms of movement are fair game. I'll be playing as Luigi for now, but I might switch to another character later on if I find it to be more useful. And that's basically it. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe before the video starts so that you don't miss any future challenges. And if you don't, Luigi's going to be very upset, and you don't want that. Anyways, let's get on with the challenge. Starting with 1-1, the first thing I did was grab a Super Acorn. I quickly realized that gliding with this power-up was a lot faster than simply walking, so this is definitely something that'll be useful later down the line. At first, I was worried about running out of time, but I was able to get to the flagpole with plenty of time to spare. In fact, I finished with more than half the time left, which, really says a lot about this game. Next up was 1-2, and it was only slightly more difficult than the last one. I did have a close call towards the beginning, but the rest of the level was simple enough. One tower was only moderately more difficult without running, and the fight against Boo Boom only took a couple of seconds to beat. Haha, take that, idiot. 1-3 was the easiest level yet, since I could just glide over everything. And I could have done the same thing in 1-4 if I hadn't lost my scroll suit at the beginning, but it didn't really matter, since this level was still 100% possible. I decided to try 1-5 as well, even though I didn't really have to, and this one could also be completed. But One Castle, on the other hand, gave me my first real challenge. The majority of this level features platforms that swing back and forth, and for whatever reason, I was having an incredibly difficult time getting the timing down. After a couple of stupid deaths, I just said screw it and used a Super Acorn to bypass all of the obstacles. The fight against Lemmy, the best Koopaling, didn't have any issues, which means it's time to move on to World 2. 2-1 was strangely difficult for me to complete. I had a really hard time timing out my jumps over these spike balls, and I was getting really frustrated with myself. It turns out that all I had to do was take my time and slowly take out the spikes one by one, because once I did that, the rest of the level was easy as pie. Both 2-2 and 2-3 could be completed without any issues. In fact, I don't really have much to say about either of them. But the same could not be said for 2-Tower. Normally, you're supposed to spin these screws to make these blocks form a temporary path. However, the blocks can crush you if you aren't moving fast enough, and right away I knew this was gonna be a problem. Luigi always either bonked his head because he didn't have enough speed, or got crushed by the blocks while waiting for them to get close enough. So, is that it? Is this the end of the challenge? Well, no actually, as I had one more trick up my sleeve, the Mini Mushroom. Usually this power-up is more of a downgrade than an upgrade, since it makes your character really small, and makes it really hard to kill enemies. But one nice thing about it is that it makes your jumps much floatier, allowing you to make more distance in the air. So by using this power-up, I could just barely squeeze my way to the top in time. Talk about a close call. Thankfully, the rest of World 2 is pretty simple. These include 2-4, 2-5, 2-6, and 2-Tower. Normally 2-Tower would have been pretty difficult, but any and all challenge was remedied with the help of the Super Acorn. And after stomping on Morton's head 3 times, I was ready to move on to World 3. Free 1 was a pretty harmless level. I just had to be mindful of the Hucket crabs, and everything else was all peachy. Free 2 was an underwater level, and last time I checked, it's impossible to run underwater. Well, unless you're Sonic the Hedgehog, but regardless, this level could be completed flawlessly. Free Tower was a bit troubling due to the skewers, but once I got the timing down, this level wasn't too bad. And the same thing can be said for Free Ghost House. There were a few tricky jumps here and there, but everything here was more than possible. The title of Free Water Spout Sprint had me worried at first, but luckily, the water spouts moved at a pretty slow speed, so no sprinting was required. Free 4 had lots of jumping Cheep Cheeps, but nothing I couldn't manage. And Free 5 was just another water level, so you already know how well that one went. For Free Castle, I had to make sure I could take a stock from this Banzai Bill, since I couldn't walk away fast enough to avoid him. But aside from that, the rest of this level was smooth sailing. Then after foiling Larry's plans, I could now go on to World 5. but I'm not going to go there just yet. Even though World 4 is technically optional, I figured I might as well see if this route was also possible. Because why not, am I right? But actually, World 4 brought us an easy streak of levels. These include 4-1, 4-2, 4 Tower, 4 Free, 4-4, and 4-5. All of these levels could be completed very easily and didn't have anything too noteworthy to report. Even 4 Ghost House could be beaten without moving too quickly. This is usually my least favorite level in New Super Mario Bros. U, so I'm just glad this one didn't give me as much trouble as I was expecting. But now on to 4 Castle, and right off the bat, I could tell this level was going to be difficult. What you're supposed to do is run along these bricks before the Thwomps come down and destroy them. But because I can't do that, that means I have to find some other way across. My first idea was to use a Super Acorn to lure the Thwomps down, so that way I could just glide across. But that didn't work since the gap was too big, and I just ended up taking damage from them anyway. My next idea was to use a Superstar to destroy all of the Thwomps, and while I got much further using this method, the power-up eventually ran out and there were still a lot of Thwomps to go. At this point, I was all out of ideas and just decided to give up. And it's a shame too, since I could get really close to the end of the level. But alas, that makes it our first impossible level. Thankfully, we already have access to World 5, so this world doesn't really matter. But first, I had to complete the airship level. This level was a little challenging thanks to the hammer and boomerang bros, but it wasn't anything I couldn't handle. In 5-1, I found this secret area that let me bypass most of the poison section, which made this level incredibly easy. 5-2, however, was not so generous. These blocks kept moving in and out of the poison, and it was really hard to tell when it was time to jump because of how fast they moved. After about 10 or so silly deaths, I decided to whip out the Super Acorn and just glide over everything. I'm sure that this level could be beaten without one, but unfortunately, I lack the skills to do so. I'm okay. No, really, I'm fine. Aside from the brambles getting on my nerves, 5 Free could also be completed, and so could 5 Tower, 5 Ghost House, and 5-4. Van Gogh would be proud. And to make things even better, every other level in this world was also possible. These include 5-6, 5-7, and 5 Castle. You know, it's almost funny how the farther we get into this journey, the less and less obstacles we run into. Let's just hope this luck carries over to World 6. 6-1 didn't present me with any issues. All I had to do was occasionally wait for the fuzzies to pass, and I was all set. 6-2 had a Porcupuffer swimming about, which made things a bit tricky. Luckily, this level is really short, and could be completed fairly easily. And the same thing could be said for 6 Tower. 6 Free had lots of spikes throwing spike balls, and vertically moving platforms. Timing my jumps was a bit difficult, but it only took a little bit of practice to get down. 6-4 was an incredibly slow auto-scroller, so this one barely felt any different. 6-5 featured stalking piranha plants, but aside from that, it was a piece of cake. The second tower in World 6 had lots of platforms that required Luigi to spin, but since spinning isn't the same thing as running, I was in the clear. 6-6 was only accessible by finding a secret exit that I honestly couldn't remember, so I just went straight to 6-7. And this level was super funny, because I found that you can just walk above the stage, and basically skip the entire level. I feel bad for not attempting the actual challenges that were presented to me, but at this point, I don't really care. And finally, 6 Castle didn't have anything too challenging about it. I just had to avoid the blocks falling down, and that was about it. Then after stomping on Roy's oversized forehead a couple of times, it was time to take on World 7. Immediately upon starting 7-1, I had a really close call where I missed my jump and had to wall jump off this ice block between 2 fuzzies to survive. I have no idea how I didn't die there, but who knows? Maybe I'm actually getting good at this game. Nah. Anyways, this level was annoying since all of the ice bros were freezing me right as I was jumping over every bottomless pit. It took quite a few tries, but eventually I got through it all. 7-2 only had me bouncing on wigglers with very little else, and 7-3 was pretty simple all things considered. But then I got to 7 Tower, and that's when all hopes of completing this challenge went down the drain. Normally, you're supposed to run down this corridor as the floor and ceiling close up behind you, and just after one attempt, it was clear that it didn't have close to enough speed to make it through without running. My first idea was to use a Super Acorn since it allowed me to move faster, and while this got me much farther than just walking, it still wasn't getting me close enough. My next thought was to use a Superstar, but it didn't last long enough for me to be able to try it out, and I doubt it would have worked anyway. I even tried using different characters like Peachette and Nabbit, but not even they were able to get through without getting squished. And unfortunately, there aren't any secret exits that can take me farther than I am right now, so I'm pretty much stuck here with no possible way to continue on. It looks like this is the end of the road for us. That's right, after dozens and dozens of attempts, I finally got the timing right and was able to barely squeeze through the final blocks. I legitimately thought for the longest time that this was impossible. I was seriously only a few days away from uploading this video when I had this amazing breakthrough, so it was a pretty close call. Regardless, the challenge lives on, and the quest to defeat Bowser continues. 7 ghost tests had ghost blocks that forced me to move around the whole time. Luckily their patterns were predictable, so I didn't have too much trouble. 7-4 contained lots of tricky platforming, but this was child's play for me at this point. And besides, even Yoshi got to join me for this level, and you can't go wrong with a little 7-5 had lots of flame chomp action, and could be beaten without much effort. And since 7-6 is a snake block level, this one was also pretty easy. 7 Castle though was a different story. There were lots of moving blocks that kept crushing Luigi, and it was pretty difficult to make it through without getting squashed. After a while, I found a route that allowed me to get around everything, but I will admit, this one did take quite a while to figure out. Since I'd gotten so used to getting squished by that point, I decided to give Ludwig the same treatment, and once he was down, I finally had access to the final world. Oh yeah, and there's the airship level too. Gosh, this level sucks. There were a lot of obstacles to avoid, but it was all possible in the end. And with that out of the way, now it's time for World 8. 8-1 would have been trouble for regular Luigi, but for Flying Squirrel Luigi, it was easy street all day. For 8-2, I had to keep all of the enemies off the lift, which was surprisingly simple to do. Even the ending with all the Monumoles and Fire Bros was a walk in the park. 8-3 was very fast going, but all it took was a little bit of patience. And the same thing pretty much applies to 8 Castle. But now it's time for the final level. This was my last challenge, and it did not go easy on me. I had to make some insane jumps to get across this first part, since the time the platform stayed above the lava was very short. In fact, the timing was so precise that sometimes I had to bounce off Bowser Jr. just to ensure I'd have enough time for them to come back. And if that wasn't enough, directly after that, I had to fight Bowser. Surprisingly though, I could run underneath him without taking damage, which was something I didn't think I'd be able to do. But after that, it was time for Phase 2. This was the last step, the final challenge in order to finish my quest. And this is not good. Usually this is a pretty easy final boss, but there's one move that Bowser performs that puts this whole challenge at risk. After you hit Bowser once, he'll retract into his shell and start hopping around the stage. Normally the player's just supposed to run away, but that clearly isn't an option for us. So every time I tried this fight, this move screwed me over because I didn't have enough hit points to make it through to the end. So what does that mean? It means I have to play the entire level perfectly without getting hit just so I can maybe stand a chance against Final Bowser. And after a couple of attempts, I finally got my chance. I survived the first attack, and the second. Now all that was left was to smash Bowser's head again, and yes! We did it! We have officially beaten new Super Luigi U without running! Woohoo! Yeah! So, would I recommend doing this challenge for yourself? Yeah, this challenge was a lot of fun, and a great way to spice up an old game. Although there were a few tricky parts along the way, I still think this challenge is great for beginners looking to get better at this game, and I hope this video serves as a guide for anyone who wants to try it for themselves. Anyways, thank you all for watching this video, and be sure to check out the videos on screen for more video game goodness. And until next time, goodbye.